so glad you joined me today. I am going to show you how to make some dried apples. This is apple season. These make a perfect snack. I love to have a big jar of these sitting on the back of my counter, just like a cookie jar, but filled with something that's much healthier for us. So these are really easy, and I'm just going to walk you through really quickly how I do this. I have my apple peeler here. Mine's been a little bit modified, but this is just your basic apple peeler. They come on they have a little screw so that you can attach them to your counter, or they have the suction cup, which that kind works really well. I've had this one for a long time now, so I just continue to use it. I got my favorite dehydrator, and I'm just gonna jump right in and start and show you how. So what I would do is I take my apples first, and you can wash those, but we're gonna peel them. And I'm going to share just one little tidbit here first also is Honeycrisp apples. That's what these are. This is my favorite kind of apple to use. Jonagold is another very good apple to use. Those two apples are kind of my favorite for drying because when you dry them and they are open to the air, they don't turn brown right away. You can see these. It's not that they're perfectly white, but they don't discolor very bad at all. So that's why those two are my favorite. We just love to eat them. So the extra apples I love to have around. When they're huge, and Honeycrisp and Jonagold are kind of known for being big, they are very difficult to get them to slice correctly and go through the core. So the best apples are ones that are, when you're digging through your Honeycrisp or whatever kind of apple you're going to use, are medium or even small apples for your apple slicer. So just kind of keep that in mind, okay? So I just take an apple, I'm going to put it right on there, put it up to my little blade right here, and then I'm just going to start twisting it, and it's just going to start peeling it. Sometimes it gets a little stuck. I take a little bit off, and then I'll show you again, if all the peel doesn't come off perfectly, I'll show you how I just will use a paring knife. And you can leave this little bit of skin on if you wanted to. I want most of mine off just because we like it better that way. And I like to give these, so then I like my skin to be off. Okay, so just take a little bit of this off. Sometimes they come out perfect, not every time, but this peeler still makes very short work of filling this dehydrator up with apples. Then, and again, this apple was a little bit on the big side, so you'll see when I use a smaller one, it'll go through quicker. The halves are fine. I will just slice right down my apple, and now I have all slices ready to lay on my dehydrator sheets, which I'm going to open and get out in just a second. I could cut these in half if I wanted to, could cut your whole apple in half too. But let's just peel a couple more apples and we'll load up this dehydrator. That's how we love for them to come off. I don't throw the bottoms off. You can use those too. My family will still eat them. Pull that core off and just put your next apple on. Okay, so I'm going to take a little bit of this skin off here again that it left on there. This really doesn't take too long. Usually I can load my whole dehydrator of about 15 or 20 trays all by myself in maybe about an hour. Sometimes it takes me a little less. But this is something your kids will love to help you with. My kids love drying apples because they love to eat apples, and we even would get 2 slicers going, and your older kids can definitely help out with this. Take a little bit off of there. So now we would just load them onto trays. This is my dehydrator. And let me just take a minute to just tell you about my dehydrator. This is my favorite dehydrator. It is a round one. There's lots of other good ones out there. It's kind of preference whether you want round or square. I love it because it's lightweight. I can add trays. I can use just a few trays. When I want to test something, I can just lift my lid and test something easily to any tray that I want to test. That was important to me, so that's why I like this one. It's a Garden Master. It's by Nesco, and I can put up to, I think, 20 or 30 trays. I have about 18 or 20 trays, so I usually have this baby loaded with 15 or 18 trays. So we just take the lid off, and let me take a couple more minutes to tell you a couple more things, other things that you might wonder about it. Yes, it comes with screens, and they are handy to use for some herbs or petals, things that are going to fall through. It also comes with your fruit roll-up sheets. And a trick I learned about fruit roll-up sheets, instead of these, is to use a piece of parchment paper. We just cut it out like a circle, put a hole in it. I put it on my tray, because that's what this is. I would spread my fruit leather, whatever I was making, whether it was apple or berries or mixed apple and berry, I spread it on the parchment paper and dry it that way, okay? Then when it's done, it's wonderful. It's not on this tray, it's not on this. I'm going to lift it off, and I'm just going to take scissors and I'm going to cut strips of the fruit leather with the parchment paper and the fruit leather already on there. And then we just roll those strips up into a roll with the parchment paper again. And now it's so easy for the kids to use. I store all those fruit roll-ups in a jar, and they just pull apart just like a store-bought fruit roll-up. So that's a little handy tidbit that can be helpful to know. All right, we'll get rid of those. Okay, so now we've got a clean tray that's ready to go. Where's my paring knife here? And I will just start to literally load these on my rack, and fill a rack. When one rack's full, then I'll just fill another rack, and I will break pieces to fill this tray. I'm okay if I have a half. Mine, I don't feel like my rings all have to be perfect. You can see in my jars, they're not perfect, but I just fill my tray up just nice and as full as, you know, as many as I can get on there. Whoops, accidentally hit it on. And then I would take another tray and I will just fill that tray up too. Some of these rings really are big, and you can leave them big or you can break them in halves. Again, you decide, it's just personal preference. And my family to this day, even though all my kiddos are grown up, they love dried apples, and they will all get some at Christmas time. And even in the end of this video, I will even show you some fun ways that I make dried apples into gifts, ways that you can package them up. So again, I'm always just trying to fit as many on that tray as I can. And I'm okay if they're touching. I don't really want them on top of each other, but if they're touching a little bit, as they dry, they're gonna shrink right up. So I'm okay with that. And I will be checking them and watching them, and then again, I would just keep right on it going, okay? And I would just use all my apples, fill all these trays up, put them on, put my lid on, and then I would turn my dehydrator on. And I usually keep it on low, the lowest setting, which I believe is like 95, yep. If you wanted to, and you were using an apple that you think is gonna turn brown a little bit quicker, you can turn the heat up to like 105, 110. I would try not to go more than 115. And just do your first hour or two at that little bit higher temp so that they hopefully won't brown so much. I don't have a whole lot of trouble unless I really goof up and leave them on too long, which I'm going to show and share some of those with you here, because that happens, and that's okay. They're still all useful. Nothing goes to waste. This is great chicken scraps. If you have chickens, or you throw it on the compost bin, however you get rid of your excess. Now, also, you can, a couple more things that I just want to remember to tell you here. You could shake these with cinnamon and sugar if you want to have cinnamon and sugar on them. You could dip these in lemon juice if you wanted to. I skip all that because we're just after the healthy snack. I don't really feel it needs a lemon. It gives it a little bit of a tartness, and I don't really care for that either. So that's the way I do it. And then I will just store them in a jar. This is just a really handy big old jar I love to have a label on it. I love to just fill it up and have it on the back of my counter. But any big pickle jar that you had would work great for this. You can store them in smaller jars if you wanted to. So before we let these just continue to run, I want to tell you how long, which is about 12 hours. I find that really has to go 12 hours. And I like mine, because I'm going to show you these here. Mine are crunchy, okay? I love them when they're crunchy. So that's going to take me more like 14 hours, maybe 15 hours, okay? If it's really warm out, my weather is already getting quite cool. These are delicious. I love this. I got them just right when they're super crunchy like this. Again, you're going to open it up. You're going to test them, and you're going to see if they're soft and chewy or moisture, and if they're not done all the way. If you fill them in a jar, they're going to mold after a while, and that is very discouraging when you go grab a jar and they're moldy. Ask me how I know. So you want to be sure that they're good and dry. And I will tell you this also. You might say, oh, these are too crunchy, because I got one of my kids is like, I don't like them quite that crunchy, like potato chips. And that's really about what these are. You can go a little bit less, but time alone, after a month or two, especially if I put them in a bag, even in a freezer bag or any kind of bag, they will start to soften up a little bit. They won't go mold, but they'll get softer, more like a store-bought, chewier, softer apple, okay? I put mine in glass. I try not to let mine get to that point because I love them when they're crunchy and crispy. So again, that's totally up to you. Now, I'm gonna grab a couple trays and show you when they're done, simply how I just take them off, and I would fill them in jars, okay? So let me grab a couple trays. We're back, and these have gone. I like to do them overnight, like I said, 12 to 14 hours, probably about 15 hours right now. And you can tell that they've shrunken up. They look great. Lots of times I'm taking a nibble here and there. I just want them, I want mine nice and crisp. They almost crunch. You don't have to go that far though. Some people might not want them to be quite that crunchy, but you won't have to worry about them molding at all if you do go this far. Then, literally, I'll just gather them, put them in my jar, big jars, small jars, however you're gonna store them, okay? These are yummy. I love the flavor of the Honeycrisp apple and the Jonagold too. And some people might say, even though that's an apple that's a little bit juicier, that, you know, it takes longer. I guess I just love the flavor. And so what I would encourage you in is, if you love the flavor of the apple, then you will like it when it's dried. We had some friends of ours who loved Gala apples, and my husband was kind of raised eating Gala apples, and they are a sweeter apple. And once they were dried, it was just a little too sweet for us, but my friend loves them. So if you like it, then use that apple that's your favorite. Now, a little tidbit more about apples, and when you're using them with the peeler, okay, is that if you use an apple like a Macintosh or a Cortland, that's a very soft apple, and that will have a really hard time going through your apple peeler. And maybe I shouldn't say really hard time, but a softer apple, it just is harder to go through that peeler. It doesn't want to go through well. It wants to twist, kind of like, you know, when you screwed something in too far and it's losing its grip. That's kind of what happens on it. So think about that with the softer apples. But I would encourage you, try different apples. There was one year, my sons were all into like, which apple is the best? And we dried like 5 or 6 different kind of apples. And just to find out what our favorite was, and that darn Honeycrisp and the Jonagold, they win every time. So that's what I stick with. Jonagold's a little bit of a less expensive apple, but it tastes almost exactly like a Honeycrisp. So that's why I recommend that one. So that's all there is to it. You empty all your trays, put them in your jar. And my trays, you can just rinse them off. That's what I do. I just soak them or rinse them off. Another way that I love to use my apples is, my dried apples, is in my oatmeal. So these are just little packets of, you might call them instant oatmeal, but it's not really instant. It's whole oats that I have in here with my dried apples. A little bit of seasoning, even put some coconut oil in here. And yes, you can make these up, have them ready to go. You could do a bigger jar of oatmeal mix that is ready to fix if you have a larger family. I used to do that back when all the kids were around. I would make up big quart jars of oatmeal. They called it instant oatmeal, even though it wasn't. And we just put our dried apples pieces right in there. So that is just a little tidbit that on the oatmeal. Now I want to share with you these. They look dark, and in my opinion, they're too dark to give. I was taking too long to get my dehydrator on, so another little tip is turn your dehydrator on as soon as you get your first tray of sliced apples on, okay? And keep it running while you're slicing your apples and filling up your tray, okay? That helps them not to turn brown. It keeps them nice and white looking. The other thing that can make apples go brown, besides just the air, is doing them too long. So let's say I let them go overnight, but they really only need, like I said, 12 to 14 hours. So that means I need to put them on later in the evening, about 6 or 7, so that I'm taking them off by 6 or 7 a.m. If I start them earlier in the day, about 1 p.m., or let's see, it'd actually even be more like 11 a.m., and then left them overnight because you had a long day, things went crazy, whatever, they're gonna be really crispy and sometimes even turn dark. That's okay. To be honest, these still taste great. Nice crunch, I think. Definitely edible, okay? They just don't look quite as nice. So another great place to use these is in your little oatmeal, you know, package, or whether you're just making your oatmeal up singly, make up your oatmeal and just crack some in your oatmeal. You don't even have to have a fancy recipe for this. You can use these in muffins. You could use these in any other kind of baking that you want to. You could even crunch these up and use them on salad if you wanted to. So it's not a loss. They just don't look as nice as all, because we do love dried apples. That's kind of it for just drying apples on the dehydrator and just getting them all done and finished so that you can eat them. But I'm going to take a few minutes to show you, if you want to see yet, how I would package up just a simple jar or a baggie of dried apples for giving at Christmas time or Thanksgiving time, or maybe somebody's birthday is around the fall time that you would like to give a gift. So let me just show you a couple little gift ideas if you want to hang around and see how I do that.